What's up, everybody? Dan here with Dan and Sarah Makers, and we are coming at you with another Tool Tuesday. I have to admit, this is the second time that I've filmed this video, and I filmed it last night, quite late, and then I got up, tried to edit it and upload it this morning before work at about 4:15, and I realized that I hadn't turned the microphone on, so I had no sound. So I'm doing it after work today. So anyways, on today's Tool Tuesday, we are going to be talking about Roto Hammers and a little bit on hammer drills. So starting out at kind of the low end of things, we're going to talk about a hammer drill. Most of your modern cordless drill drivers nowadays, most of them, not all, but a lot of them will have typically three settings. You'll have a driver only, a drill only, and then you'll have your hammer drill. The driver has adjustable torque, the drill has basically locked out torque or maximum torque before a clutch engages, and then the hammer drill just basically has two geared kind of plates that rotate against each other, and so you're constantly kind of climbing up a gear, dropping back, and so you get a really fast kind of vibration. That particular mode of drilling for masonry, concrete, things like that, isn't very good in my opinion. They use a standard looking drill bit with a round shank on the end, and they're usually chrome plated. I'm not sure why, if that's supposed to make them more heat resistant or something, but they just have a carbide insert that's been brazed into the tip of the bit. These, from my experience and much agony over the years, there are very few situations where these are actually effective to any extent, unless you're drilling into, say, a CMU brick or a mortar joint on a masonry wall with a hammer drill. It just doesn't have the impact force, and it's so fast that typically you'll burn these bits up. If the carbide doesn't melt, the tip will, like literally, the tip will melt off, and you'll have like this blob of melted steel on the end of your bit. So if you can at all avoid it, don't bother using the hammer drill setting on a cordless drill, my opinion. So moving up, if you do have to drill anything to any extent, I would recommend either renting, borrowing, or buying an actual hammer drill. You can maybe go to a store like Harbor Freight if you only have to do a few holes or something. You might be able to buy one that might be somewhat comparable to renting one and use it for a few holes or more. This is a Bosch Bulldog. This is an old one. I've had it rebuilt professionally at least once, and it's probably about ready to get it again if I decide to keep it and try to keep having it work. But this is a 3-selection hammer drill. It has a drilling only mode where it just rotates. It has a hammer drill mode where it rotates in hammers or impacts, and then it has an impact only or chiseling mode. So you can actually do light demolition, chipping concrete, things like that. When I did a lot of plumbing, this type of hammer drill was pretty nice because you could chip through a concrete slab. It wasn't fast, but say you're replacing the flange on a toilet and a slab, this would be a good way to chisel down around that flange. Or if you're replacing the waste or overflow on a bathtub or a shower drain, something like that, where you were in a slab and had to expand the opening for the drain, this worked pretty well. The next step up that you'll see typically is a Hilti. And there are a lot of different models of Hiltis, and they come out with a new one or a different one over the years. But this, again, this is very similar to the Bosch. It has the 3 selections. This one actually has a, I'm not sure, it has a 4th selection, and honestly I've never used it. But it has your standard rotation, it has your chiseling or just non-rotation, just impact. It has a rotation with impact for the hammer drill. So that's pretty good. And then it also has a forward and reverse on it down here, which is a nice feature. Sometimes you could get a bit stuck, and having the ability to try and reverse a bit will help. These styles of drills both take what's known as an Sds Shank Bit, And all these bits here that I have, these chisels and these drill bits, have an SDS shank, which is basically the style of engagement of the bit to the drill. There's SDS, SDS Plus, SDS Max, and then you move up to the larger sizes where you get into a spline drive shank. So they all have different types of shanks. These are kind of interesting. It's kind of like a 1/4 inch drill driver where you pull back on a collet on the chuck, you slide the bit in the correct orientation, and it snaps in place and it locks. So, and then to remove it, you pull that collar back, and you can slide the bit out. As far as bits, looking at the chisels, we have a point chisel, which is really good for starting a hole in concrete because it's focusing all the force into one small area. This is pretty good at that type of work, starting a hole. A lot of people like to put a chisel in to start a hole, but that kind of distributes the impact area and it doesn't quite chisel as quickly or as neatly. This one here is a narrow chisel. We get into a wider chisel, which this is a little bit too wide for concrete work. Something like this would be good for removing tile, getting underneath tile, removing thin set, things like that. You could potentially sharpen it up as long as you don't mess up the temper, and you could use it to remove things like glued down linoleum. Hopefully it's not asbestos based, but yeah, you could remove different types of toppings and coatings and things like that with a wider chisel like that. This one here is specifically designed for removing coatings. It actually has a bend to it so you can scrape along the floor or surface, and it's got a single plane edge on it where it's been sharpened or beveled to a single point, kind of like a wood chisel. Moving on, we get into the bits. Obviously, as you can see, there's large bits to extremely small bits. These are pretty versatile in what they can and can't do size-wise, for drilling through holes for small pipes or pretty much any type of anchor, bolt, expansion anchor, things like that, epoxy anchor. These drills will pretty much handle it unless you're getting into some really, really big stuff. But as you can see, there's different types of flute geometry, and flutes are the spirals. And this one's a pretty simple single flute bit. This one's got a double flute, and you've got a high and a low flute on this. There are some where we have just a double spiral flute. Actually, this might be 4 spiral because this has a cruciform bit. So this has 4 flutes on it, and they're all the same height or diameter on the outside. And then this bit here, this is kind of an early type of cruciform bit where it has some nubs on the side. It's not a perfect T like this type of bit here has, but it has kind of a light double spiral flute. Talking about the flutes, that is how the dust gets out of the hole as you're drilling. The one hint that I have for that is that the drill bits, the smaller you get when you get into 1/4 inch and smaller, this is a 5/32 bit here, that's about as small as you're going to get. There's very, very little room for the dust to get out of the hole, and a lot of people will get really aggressive and just try and drill as fast as they can and just keep pushing until they get as far as they want to drill into the masonry or concrete. What will happen though is as you're drilling, you'll start feeling the drill starting to torque because all that dust is locking itself up in the hole in between the bit and the hole wall, and it's getting compressed, and you're getting a lot of friction, a lot of heat, and that dust can't come out. What will happen is you will actually start to melt the bit, and the sides of the bit will start to flatten out, and it'll abrade really quick, and you'll have a very short life on your bit. So for small bits, 1/4 inch and below, I would recommend pretty much letting the drill do the work. Just hold it lightly enough and push lightly enough that you hear the hammer drill action actually occurring, where you have that kind of buzzing sound, not just a spin. And every so often, as soon as you start feeling a little bit of torque on the drill, go ahead and pull the bit out, and you'll actually see kind of the dust kind of poof out. So do that, let the dust out of the hole, get it out of there, keep drilling. As soon as you start feeling a little bit of resistance or some squeaking or squealing, go ahead and pull it out, get that dust out of the hole. That'll extend your bit life substantially. In some cases, there's a type of screw that's really popular. I haven't had lots of luck with it, but they're those blue screws, and they're supposed to be masonry concrete screws. This particular kit here is a Bosch kit, and it's got a couple different drill bits. And these drill bits are basically the same as any of these, except they have a hex shank on the end here. So you can drill a hole, its diameter is matched to the blue screws, and then you just slide this sleeve over it, and in the end of this sleeve you have the correct driver bit for those screws, whether it's a number 2 or 3 Phillips or a hex head. So they have a couple different diameter bits in here, and then a couple different driver sizes that are most popular for those blue screws. My experience with those screws is either the base material is too hard for the screws to actually cut the threads in, and you'll shear the screw off, it'll just snap off because it's a very hard metal, which leads to kind of carbon embrittlement, and you'll have more of a tendency to snap screws off. Or the base material is too soft, and the Roto Hammer will actually kind of walk around and actually over drill the diameter of the hole to the point where the screw doesn't get a good bite into the sidewalls. So that's just my experience. I will be doing a video shortly on different types of concrete and masonry anchors, different tricks, tips for both basically a permanent anchor and a temporary anchor. That should be coming up shortly. One last thing that you might run into is with drilling into concrete, sometimes you'll run into rebar. In the past, I succumbed to the temptation, and I got myself what's called a Relton bit or a Rebar Cutter Bit. And this is basically a drill bit that's designed for rebar cutting. So if you're drilling into concrete and you hit rebar and you just have to put that anchor there for some reason, you can use a Relton bit or a rebar cutting bit to actually drill through that rebar. If you do, be aware that if that rebar is structural and it's there for a reason, which sometimes it is, if you're going into just a regular slab on grade, probably not a big deal, but if you're going into a column or pilaster or grade beam or something like that, something structural, don't drill the rebar unless you have some sort of engineering approval. But these bits here, if you do use them, put it in a regular drill, or if it has a hex shank or an Sds shank on the end, do not use hammer drill setting with these drill bits. Use these drill rotation only, or you will destroy the bit really fast. Also, use a very low speed on this bit. Don't use a high speed. Again, you'll burn your bit up and you'll be out a rather expensive bit. So that's a Relton bit. And then I guess the only other thing really is that Hilti did come out with these Cruciform Bits, which are this T-shaped carbide cutting tip on these. Probably, I'm going to say 8 years ago. And these will actually drill through light rebar, light embed plates, things like that, without just dancing around and not drilling. So those have been beneficial a few times in my experience. But again, you know, we're not making a habit of drilling through rebar if we can at all avoid it. So that's just kind of a quick overview on the smaller diameter roto hammers and hammer drills that you might find out on a job site. Without having one of these drills, if you do need to drill into concrete to attach things, your life will be absolutely miserable with just a hammer drill. There's a YouTube site, another YouTube channel, Better Living for Life, where there's a couple over in Idaho building a house, and one of their videos was I hate drilling concrete, and he was using a hammer drill, hammer drill, yeah, and just trying to drill with these small bits here like this to drive those blue screws in, and he was not having a lot of luck. So invest in it if you need it, and your life will be a lot better. So we've got some exciting videos coming up. I have to say my energy level's a little low today. I'm sorry about that. But got the video already planned for next week, so we should be having some good stuff coming up. So until next week, this is Dan with Dan and Sarah Makers. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever. We really appreciate everybody that does subscribe, does comment, all the views we get. That's really awesome. It's really fun to wake up in the morning and kind of check to see where we're at, and just kind of starts off the day right. So until next time, have a good one. Bye.